Hi, and welcome to the next session in Rubrik's Public Sector Summit 2025 on cyber resilience in government. Pleased to be joined today for today's panel on lessons in cyber collaboration with state local government representatives. I'm pleased to be joined by Meg Cook from the state of New York, Nate Wentland, the CIO from Loudoun County in Virginia, and Eric Rotondi from the New York City Cyber Command. Meg, would you please give a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Meghan Cook from the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services Cyber Incident Response Team, a part of the Office of Counterterrorism. And we do work with local governments. We support them in incident response and proactive cybersecurity services.
Excellent. Thank you. And Nate, over to you.
Nate Wentland, CIO for Loudoun County. We're one of the largest data center locations in the entire world. We have around 80% of the internet traffic running through the county, and we're definitely one that is very heightened on cybersecurity and global awareness of security for what's happening, not only in this region, but globally.
Okay. Thank you. And Eric, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Eric Rotondi, Chief Operating Officer of New York City Cyber Command. New York City Cyber Command oversees the cybersecurity operations for the city of New York. So 8.6 million New Yorkers, 300,000 employees. We're responsible for detection, response, and deploying of tools and technologies across the entire state.
Thank you. Great to have everybody here today. For the audience, my name is Travis Rosiek. I'm the Public Sector CTO at Rubrik. Spent half of my career in the government space, DoD and Intel community doing cyber work, and then been in industry helping public and private sector organizations solve some of these hard problems. One of the problems that keeps me up at night, and I'm sure most of our panelists as well, is cyber resilience and/or the lack of cyber resilience in some cases. So the way the threat actors have been evolving over the last several years, cyber criminals, an increased motive in having disruption. So as Nate was just mentioning, a vast majority of the internet flows through his county in particular. Obviously, with New York, a lot of the financial services sector is huge in that region as well. The adversaries, are more incentivized and potentially more able to disrupt things from a cyber domain, the more dependent we are. So I think cyber resilience is, a national security emergency or imperative. So pleased to be joined with you today and looking forward to digging in. Okay, so first question over to you, Meg. Obviously, your coordination role, you're constantly, actually, I'm curious how big your business card is to fit your organization on there, but I think firefighter also makes sense given the amount of coordination and constantly helping your organizations you support deal with the cyber domain and the crisis that we're facing. So that said, what is one recent experience or a handful of recent experiences that you've had to deal with that demonstrates the power or the challenge of some of the cross-government collaboration?
Thank you. So at the Division of Homeland Security in CERT, we support over 17,000 organizations. So when you look at counties, cities, towns, villages, special districts, school districts, public authorities, there is a varying amount of cyber maturity across those organizations. And we're doing both incident response and proactive services. So the challenge comes in when you have a more cyber mature organization and they need more of a full risk assessment. So we're spending more time doing all of the technical scans, the policy review. But on the other end, we might have a village who is being faced with some phishing scams. So when you have to be prepared for everything across the gamut, you really do need people who are able to help all types of organizations. But one of the things that we have here in New York that I think is important to talk about is that we have a really strong state cyber steering committee that works among all of those different organizations. So we're sharing information weekly about what we're seeing. What can we get out to school districts that we're seeing just starting to move from, oh, it's hitting public authorities. So now what can we do? We see it moving to school districts. How can we inform them and help them get ahead of the curve? But when I think about challenges also, it's the needs of all of those organizations because they're so different. They're so completely different in what they're able to afford. Their budgets are all over the map. And their understanding of what defense in depth means. So we spend a lot of time talking with officials about what defense in depth means. And then we might not have to do that for public authorities because public authorities, they have a staff. So when I think about these challenges, we're constantly changing the message depending on the organization and the level of maturity that they have, and the person calling. So if we have, the IT director calling from a mid-sized county who understands defense in depth and just has an incident that, we need to address, then it's a whole different conversation than a smaller municipality who is getting faced with, a barrage of phishing scams and their staff have fallen, to those. So that's the coordination that we're doing. And that's one of the things in CERT that the staff is really good at. They're good at figuring out how to meet the people where they are to help them. What are the questions we're asking them in the beginning to help figure out what they need in that moment?
Very interesting take. Yeah, it kind of puts the human element, and then also, the vast range of the have and have-nots in the cyberspace, right? So, I mean, most of these organizations are data rich. Some are extremely cyber poor, and some maybe better resource that you can actually, when you give a more complicated recommendation, they know what you mean and they can actually successfully implement it. So, to your point, yeah, I mean that's. Being able to filter that and make sure things actually, effective cybersecurity is, I think a critical role in what you're working on. So appreciate that. So Eric, over to you. Within New York, obviously New York City and the Cyber Command itself is on the better resource side of things. So maybe talk about that from your perspective, and then you're probably working with organizations within the city that maybe have some of those discrepancies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think so. I think some of the success we've seen or some of the more recent experiences have been around sort of, I think, building some of that muscle memory around vulnerability management and remediation. So I think we have used some of the CISA directives that have come out recently as sort of a guidepost for some of the actions we've need to take locally. And so when those directives come out, we issue our own sort of emergency directive that has appropriate steps that are relevant for the city agencies. And so over time, as we've done that, we've seen agencies sort of develop that muscle memory in a really meaningful way. But we're still experiencing some of the same challenges I think Meghan pointed out, which is even at these agencies, and even though Cyber Command may be well funded and have the expertise, some of these agencies that need to take some of these actions themselves, they may not have the right staff levels, they may not have the right budget to do some of the technical uplift that's required. And so we're still dealing with some of those challenges that I think every organization is. So it's really figuring out what are the ways in which we can, rapidly sort of address some of the issues that have been outlined in 0 days or some of these directives, while also making sure that these organizations have the support that they need to do that. And so I think it's been, over the last few years, we've seen a lot of progress in that building that muscle memory. Obviously, there's definitely some more work to do.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Nate, from your perspective in Loudoun County. And then obviously you're right in the backyard of a lot of federal resources and a lot of the agencies as well. So I'm sure that adds a little another dynamic to some of the challenges you have as well.
As in what type of investments and other things that we're looking into?
Yeah, just some of the cross-government collaboration. So, your proximity to a lot of the government organizations. So Eric was mentioning CISA. So the CISA headquarters is close. A lot of the intel community and cyber intel sharing stuff. So, and then obviously the dependencies of the data centers, in the backyard. So just kind of curious your dynamic on that collaboration as it relates to, the critical infrastructure that resides in your county.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we have is we have partnerships not only with like federal government and state, but also with private industry as well. We have the majority of Fortune 500 companies that reside here and have a lot of infrastructure as well as systems and people that are here. So there's a lot of groups and organizations that at least Loudoun County is involved with, both regionally and nationally, where we stay aware of things that are happening, both from the federal government and also from local partners in the region. I think one of the things, at least from this region, we're able to do multi-state approach with DC, Maryland, and Virginia, where we're able to collaborate cross borders as well as cross industry. So that allows us to be able to see things that are happening not only in certain verticals, but also in different verticals across different areas, and seeing different perspectives for us to then readjust and not just respond to things that are happening at a local government level or the state government level or the federal government level, but also that's happening in private industry and even in financial and other things. So we have a significant different perspective, I think, and input that comes from a lot of different industries and a lot of different groups that we're involved with that allow us to be able to adjust and pivot very quickly. And we have a lot of partnerships that we work with that allow us to get onto sort of a cutting edge of what we do with artificial intelligence, as well as cybersecurity, to get into a realm where we're being able to have automation instead of us being like manually reacting to a lot of things that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, I think all three of you hit the nail on the head. You know, we've reactive cybersecurity is not going to work anymore, right? So the more things you can do across all your organizations to be proactive, it's going to be imperative going forward. So next question, Eric. So what strategies have proven effective for aligning some of your cyber priorities? You know, when all of the different organizations that within the city have different missions and budgets.
Yeah, great question. I think so. When Cyber Command was formed a few years back, I think what we saw was a number of agencies trying to do really good work, but there wasn't sort of a central sort of strategy. And so one of the things we've done since the formation, and we do it twice a year, is sort of this biannual road mapping, where every 6 months we meet with each city agency to articulate sort of our priorities for the upcoming 12 months and want to hear their priorities. We build out a collaborative roadmap that really matches both priorities, capacity, funding, so that there's really an agreement on what are the things that need to be accomplished over the next 12 months. And then over those 12 months, we execute on that. And so that's really been a very sort of a key way in which we've been able to align priorities, but really also hold each other accountable, making sure that when we say either party says they're going to accomplish something, that we're able to do that. And so that's been extremely effective, and I think has really allowed us to, in really short succession, really raise the security posture across the board, across all the city agencies.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So Meg, you touched on this a little bit in your first question. And anything to add on that?
So yeah, I was just thinking, so one of the things when I described the division and the cyber incident response team, you know, in New York State, we also have New York State Information Technology Services, which takes care of all of the executive state agencies. So they have their own enterprise that has all of the cross information programs that they're working on. But when I was listening to Eric talk about strategies, one of the things we did last year was we took the results of all of the pen tests that we've done on local governments and school districts, on the risk assessments, on the tabletops, on the phishing campaigns. We hold capability workshops. And we anonymized it and we looked at what we were finding, right? And then we took all of that information. We said, here is a gap in education that we're finding in IT people. So one of them happened to be the configuration of Active Directory. So let's spend a little bit of time and create a way that builds education in that area. So in tabletop exercises, so many times an organization will have an incident response plan, but it's weak, it's small, it's a couple of pages, they haven't practiced it. So what can we do to help build knowledge and understanding in incident response plans? So when I see, what strategies have we taken, we've really gone back and looked over the course of the last 5 years to understand where these gaps are in those we serve, and started to just put out educational pieces that can help them and make it so it's not any one organization, but rather we've looked back and we see this is where we think that everyone could use a little bit of help. And those have been quite successful. I mean, there's always turnover in government. And so there's always people coming in going, hey, I didn't know that. I'm happy to have learned this. Another area was looking at procurement terms and conditions. So what do we need to pay attention to now in new contracts? And do Corp Counsel, how do they get their professional development? And what security assessments can we talk to others in local government about that are specific around procurement? So those are just a couple of ideas of things we've done.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So Nate, next question over to you. So what investments, whether it be in people, processes, or technology, do you think will be either that you've had success with or believe going into the future will have the most success in building long-term cyber resilience?
I think one of the things is people. I mean, that's an investment you always have to have consistently. Having that internal talent of being able to have a pipeline of individuals that can actually assess and be able to manage a lot of platforms. Artificial intelligence is obviously one that has to be managed moving forwards, no matter what the platform is. From a process perspective, there has to be very significant governance associated to how things are deployed, how data is organized, how your response and your reactions are actually aligned with what's needed from an operational perspective. I think there's also things we start looking at the vulnerability of data and how we actually assign and protect data as we look at things sort of moving forwards. And from a technology perspective, being able to respond to things within seconds now instead of within minutes is essential. The facts are that most cyber attacks that are happening from artificial intelligence that are attacking local governments and private industry and a lot of others. And so the reaction time now has to be within seconds. So you have to look at playbooks, you have to look at run books, you have to look at automation that allows things to be able to respond to that. So you have people that are managing that and understand how to respond to those things instead of actually having people looking at logs and looking at systems to be able to react to that. So it's really about management of those platforms and training people up onto those as we move forwards to make sure you build that long-term resilience and also making sure that there are that foundational approach of that understanding across the board. And I think one thing too is essential. I think Meg and Eric both touched on this, and it's that regional sharing of that approach and making sure that others understand and can see how that actually benefits, not only from a budgetary perspective, but also from a deployment perspective, operationally, how to free up your resources to be able to do other things and go after other issues. It becomes essential to be able to manage that across the board.
Yeah, a great point. Thank you. And Eric, over to you from a long-term cyber resilience perspective. Obviously, there are a lot of interdependencies along the way. So maybe talk through, what does that look like for New York City?
Yeah, I mean, I'd also echo the thought on people. I think, especially when we're talking about government, right? I think obviously we're probably all struggling a bit, right, to retain talent. And I think we're also probably experiencing, at least I experience a lot of the folks within the city, outside of Cyber Command at the agencies that are doing security work we're primarily IT professionals. And so they're asked to do a second job almost. And so I think when we're thinking about this, it's a lot about upskilling and reskilling. And so we've been pretty successful in I think developing something called Cyber Academy, which has sort of been that first part of the journey, right, of helping us have folks at agencies that speak our language, that know protocols and processes, and that we can really work with in an incident. We've expanded that to developing, a set of learning pathways that tie to the NICE framework, so that individuals on demand can, through beginner, intermediate, and advanced, take courses to sort of improve their knowledge, skill, and abilities. And the thought again is really, when we're trying to deploy a tool or address an incident or whatever it may be, we really need to make sure that someone at the agency, we can work with, right, and is able to do have that partnership. And so I think for us, it's really been about how do we just upskill and reskill and really sort of build that talent, and hopefully retain that talent from them seeing this value and them learning these new skills and abilities.
Yeah, couldn't agree more on the workforce, increase just the volume of workers, and then having the right skill sets. So hugely important. Education is always key. Like, cyber, you're never done. You're always learning. There's always something more to do. So, you can't rest. So Meg, from a state level perspective, looking at it across, obviously K to 12 and many other facets from that perspective at your scale, what are your thoughts on long-term cyber resilience?
So I do believe people always ask me, do you think it's a general question. Do you think things are getting better? And I do. It doesn't mean that threat actors aren't becoming more sophisticated and AI tools are like a force multiplier on them. That is all happening. But I feel as if I'm having conversations with people who are outside of a cyber role or an IT role about cyber resiliency, and they're understanding risk in a different way. And so when I think about it, I say, okay, I've just had, I have all the finance directors, I have the clerks. Both of them are starting to get it. When they say to me, I understand the principle of least privilege, it's like an amazing day. I say, yes, that's an awesome thing, because before there wasn't that understanding. So when I think about resiliency, of course, I could talk about tools, but for me, it's the fact that there are more people in the organizations paying attention to this. It's being discussed at a governance level. People are understanding risk in a different way. And when everyone is participating in that conversation and wanting to figure out how what they do in their job plays a role in protecting the organization, to me, that's progress. And I have seen a tremendous amount over the last 2 years in that space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like executives across the board are really asking the right questions.
Yes.
Well, and it's been really great. I'm sure we can all agree, right? That's in part because I think we've been surfacing these things and finding the different ways to surface these things that really like sort of checks the box for them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also, just to add to that too, is that I believe that most executives have to do that now. It has to be sort of part of their roadmap of being able to do that. I don't think I think historically 10 years ago, 20 years ago, IT, was something of, yeah, that would be nice. Now it's like essentially built into operations, and there is a consistent awareness that when IT goes down or a cyber event happens, things stop and there isn't something to recover from. And I think that now people are a lot more aware that I need to focus on that, because they're seeing the dollar amounts and they're seeing the reactions and they're seeing the operational impact. So I think that really has focused them over the years, for sure.
Yeah, I think to your point, Nate, it affects everybody now. We're so dependent on technology today in every facet of life. So when something breaks, it doesn't matter, what career you're in, your profession. It affects everybody in some form or fashion. So it's much harder to dodge. So I'm glad the executives are.
I always think it's funny when people say, "I'm just going to go back to pen and paper." I'm like, okay, that's not going to work for a long time when they have 10,000 permits coming in and all these other.
It doesn't scale. No,
it does not scale. It does not work.
Yeah, neither does printing maps on paper, especially in Loudoun County where it changes so much with all the growth. Next question over to you, Eric. So I did have a specific attack in some of the effects here, but there's just too many to keep track of. So keep a little more generic, but looking at the, cyber criminals, whether they're, tied to nation states or just, criminals in general, just trying to make money. The rapid growth in ransomware, the amount of payments they're getting, just the fraud, the whole cyber aspect is really enabling the adversary to be more effective. It's increasing the ranks. So the probability, the likelihood of a threat actor that's sophisticated having some effects. Unfortunately, they get paid more money the more disruptive their attacks are. So we're seeing a huge trend leading towards disruption. So maybe walk through, either experiences that you're aware of, maybe not specifically in New York, but other places where they've had these attacks, where they don't have some of the collaboration that you all have talked about. They don't have some of the readiness. They're not proactive. And then ultimately it ends up in, well, we don't really have a well-defined incident response and specifically a cyber recovery plan. We've never really tested actually, how do we rebuild, or can our backup survive? So maybe walk through some of the perils of not being prepared and some of those elongated recovery times where there's significant downtime, what the impact is for different organizations.
Yeah, I think the largest impact that I think folks feel, right, is when it impacts the public, right, like residents. So for me, it's, I think it was, Nate, earlier to your point around, executives having to sort of appreciate this kind of stuff. I do still feel like there's the appreciation, but until it happens, I feel like it doesn't really fully click, into them, right? It doesn't really fully click. And so, which we don't want to have happen, right? So I do feel like when you see it happen to the public, that's when everything really becomes quite real, different than when it's something internal and small. And so I think, for us at least, I think a real focus on sort of the, on some of the redundancy of systems and tools, focusing on like a lot of the crown jewels. And then like we've been doing, a considerable amount of, secure by design, continuous testing, monitoring. I think though, the big thing for us is, we have a 24/7 SOC, which is fantastic. So it's really about the visibility on our end and making sure that as new tools come online, new things are deployed, that do we have the visibility, especially if it's something that the public is going to interact with on a really regular basis. And that's critical to their everyday lives. But I also think farther upstream, the thing that's critical, and I think Meghan mentioned this earlier, is training employees, regular employees, on how to really be sort of that frontline defender. How do they spot and report a phishing attempt or a smishing attempt? And so, we've deployed a pretty substantial citywide training and awareness program. For every city employee has mandatory training each year. We do monthly phishing simulations through a range or an array of different scenarios. It could be voice, we could be asking you to submit your credentials. And so through that, we've seen a huge uptick in people that have become really champions of identifying and reporting phishing attempts. And also the click rate overall has dropped tremendously. Obviously, there's always going to be a universe of people that do, but I think our job, right, is to narrow or mitigate as much as possible. And so I think we can do as much as we want on the technical side to secure those devices and create those redundancies. But I really do think frontline defenders are just everyday employees who are interacting with the public and interacting with their email and their phones. And so I think that's where we've also focused a lot of time and effort and seen really great success as a result.
Yeah, great points. One question I like, past lives doing assessments of an organization and, asking the leader, the CEO, the general, the commander, who's responsible for cybersecurity in your organization. And then the ones that usually say the CISO, that's usually a big red flag. If they say everybody, then that's usually a good sign.
Yeah.
So Meg, over to you. Any thoughts?
So one of the things that at the division, we run the statewide cyber shared services program. So what that does is it provides, and of course this is in partnership with New York State ITS and the governor's office, which was able to get it funded, is the endpoint detection and response. So we provide EDR to the 5 biggest cities outside of New York City, which is not big compared to New York City, but they're big in the rest of the state. All the counties, and the 2 largest municipalities within each. So that EDR, it has gone a long way. We also have attack surface management offered to a large portion of that same group, and New York State ITS runs the SIM through the NYSOC. And so those provided to local governments many times they've said to me, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have those tools. Like if you didn't provide them, I wouldn't have those tools. And New York State pays for those, and it's administered through dishes. So, and then the other, there are municipalities that have some of their own, so they have a SOC. And one of the things they say to me is, we're participating in the statewide SOC because you're looking at statewide threat analysis. I only have it through my vendor, which is great, and it's providing service. But I also want to be a part of the threat hunting and understanding of what's going on throughout New York State. So another part of what happens here is the strong relationship with the New York State Police Cyber Analysis Unit. So in New York State, the CAU provides the distribution of IOCs out. So they play a really integral role with Homeland Security, ITS, and the CAU together to get that information out. And I've also heard from municipalities that say, there's lots of places you can get information. I am so happy in New York State, I know that when I get an alert from the CAU, that it is curated, it's a culmination from all of these other tools and all of these other places in New York State, and that's where it funnels out. So, when I think about long-term resiliency, I think the model we have and the fact that we're able to buy these tools for the local governments, it has gone a tremendous way.
Yeah, I mean, the interconnected nature of state governments, local municipalities, we're only as strong as the weakest link. So I think kind of those whole estate approaches help, lift the entire state and all the organizations. It raises the bar, so to speak. So
yes,
yeah, kudos for the work you guys are doing there. Nate, what about you?
I like to play the fun game of how much did the cyber event cost with a lot of my executives. I think sometimes the awareness of when these things
Is that
happen,
number going down, by the way?
Oh, no, that just goes up and just goes up immensely all the time. I think that one of the ones that I like to hit on is there was a DC event. I'm not going to say the locality, but there's a DC event that happened that cost over $140 million because of the event. And I think that sometimes having that clarity and that understanding of that impact allows for that focus of how do we then prioritize those budgets and how do we prioritize those initiatives and other things, and really trying to get people to sort of fully understand the impact across the board. I think that the biggest focus is trying to find those partners and those individuals where, as you move forwards, you find those best initiatives and best direction that you can sort of lean on and work with to create that momentum to do better as not only as an individual, but also as like a region. And to Meg's point, we're doing the same thing at a smaller level, but the towns and like like a lot of like the water districts and other things and schools that sit within Loudoun County, we're also doing the same thing with EDR and making sure they have like endpoint detection and other things, because their IT staff is like 2 or 3 people. And so like their ability to respond to stuff is they don't even know if they're patched, so they don't even know like where they're at with these things. So when these very small localities get into play, they can be just a jumping point to go after other locations. And we're seeing that consistently where somebody gets compromised and that's a trusted location, and that trusted location goes after somebody else. So I think that like trying to really get people to realize the cost of it, and the cost of it, not just for yourself, but cost of it broadly across the board. And how can you help others, not only as a local area, but also as a region? Because the better we increase the industry, as in the defense of cybersecurity for local governments, for state government, for federal government, the better we're all going to be across the board.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm a huge fan of the ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So to your point. Great conversation. I'm going to try to collapse the next two questions into one here due to the time constraints. Over to you, Meg. Wanted to chat a little bit about some of the, a lot of this has been state, local government down. Let's talk a little bit about some of the, some of the intergovernmental coordination, and then, historically how the federal government, CISA, others have worked with state, local governments on, incident response services, threat intelligence sharing, in that piece of it. And obviously, with the CISA 2015 Act expiring, now it's back for a little while until they figure out what's going to happen longer term. So maybe walk through a little bit about some of the challenges that you see from that aspect and what you've encountered over the years.
Sure. So in our state, the three main associations, so you have the Association of Counties, NICOM, the Conference of Mayors, and the Association of Towns, have really, really strong membership, and they have an understanding of cyber and an appreciation for it. So I don't think you find that in a lot of places, and all three of them work together. And as well as the New York State local government IT directors, which represents across all of those municipalities. So over the past 5 years, those groups have really come together in understanding what they need to do to support all local governments in this area of cyber resiliency. So I think that's the first thing to say. One of the other parts is, early on, a couple of local governments came to me and said, am I supposed to use the services through Homeland Security? Can I use them through CISA? And we laid it out and said, CISA has incredible programs, okay? The MSISAC has incredible programs. In order for you to be successful, you really need to tap into all of them. You shouldn't be just focusing on just one place, because there's no one agency that can serve everyone, especially across the entire United States. So we always tell people, yes, take part in the Sci-Hi program through CISA. In fact, our grants here at Homeland Security require to be a part of that Sci-Hi program. So we've always gone out there and said, these are all complementary, okay? If you get, there's many counties that sign up for the CISA pen test, and you have to, it takes a while to get back in the rotation. So they'd get the pen test, they'd be back in the rotation, but they'd also get one from us. So that's what we're saying to people is really think about all of these resources as your portfolio of places to choose, because they're not mutually exclusive. You should be tapping into all of those. With that said, some of the challenges that we still have is communicating to many municipalities the importance of some of these tools and their reliance on some smaller managed service providers. And there are some that are great, absolutely. But we've also encountered some managed service providers who are maybe not providing all the services. And so we're working on figuring out what we do at the state level to help inform the local government, saying, okay, here's the questions you need to ask, but also here's what you need to look for in the answers with your managed service provider. So those are some of the challenges that at least I've started to uncover over this past year, especially for the smaller municipalities.
No, that's great advice. Nate, over to you.
Yeah, I think everybody's heard defense in depth. I think to Meg's point, it's called information in depth. So it's making sure you have multiple layers of that information coming in and how to digest that and what you're looking at. I think the more information you have, the better informed you are. I think it's also having systems where you can actually bring that information in and allow for internal individuals or security operations center or some type of internal AI to actually digest that information and then be able to then operationalize that information. I think that becomes highly essential. The fact of, you know, having a ton of information coming in and not paying attention to it becomes tough, but you have to have that entire process and the entire workflow, but that information becomes essential from multiple areas. Just like you would not have only one lock on the front door from a cybersecurity perspective, you wouldn't take information from just one location because they're going to miss something. And when they do, it's going to hurt you, not them. And that's really what you got to look at. So I think that to Meg's point, it's essential to look at all these different vendors, whether it's coming from private industry or whether it's coming from the federal government, whether it's coming from the state government, whether it's coming from another locality in your region or even a partner some other place. If you can get information and you're able to ingest that into some type of analysis platform, then do it and get that more information in there. And even if it's redundant, that's totally fine. It just says, okay, here's from 2 locations that are saying this is a problem. But I think information in depth is the exact same thing as defense in depth.
Yeah, a great point. I think you know, avoiding single points of failure in everything is critical. So Eric, over to you. So you know, from you know what partnerships, how have partnerships worked, and then you know some of the intergovernmental coordination. What's you know what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the partnerships that I think has been pretty great is between the city and the state for the Joint Security Operations Center. So stood up a few years ago. It houses both city and state incident responders who are, you know, monitoring the entire state. There's obviously other entities at the federal and local levels that sit there as well. And so I think that has really provided I think a great opportunity for information sharing, threat intelligence sharing, et cetera. So I think we've seen a lot of value there. And I think that's been a great example of coordination.
Meg, over to you.
Oh, so, you know, for the statewide shared services, so continuing to figure out how we get that out as far as we can and expend all the resources that have already been allocated in that program to reach as many municipalities. So, and that is a significant amount of work. So it's certainly in that area. We've also developed what we are calling the top 10 mistakes that threat actors are hoping local governments make. And we've been delivering that quite a bit. And that is data that we gathered from incident responders. So, but we're putting it in a way that helps elected officials and those who are department heads understand, you know, they hear passwords. Passwords are important, but they're numb to it now because everyone's been talking about passwords. So we're showing them why passwords and long passwords are important. So we're kind of taking it and creating metaphors and different ways for them to understand why it's altogether critical for their organization. And then we're working with elected officials and giving them an actual account of something that's happened, an incident that's happened in another locality, and saying, you know, things like they didn't have any logs, so we didn't know how, we couldn't do any forensics in describing what logs mean. The credentials were all the same. Well, why are, you know, and going over some of these basic items for that level of government and really building their knowledge and capability. Of course, carrying out, you know, we're booked out on all of our services for all of our pen tests, our tabletops, continuing to do that for those organizations. And then, you know, a lot of part of my job is working with the other entities that I talked about, New York State ITS, taking the learning that's going on there and seeing what we can parlay for local governments, taking what we're learning in New York City at the cyber analysis unit, and then keeping the door open to the local government IT directors, which has cyber professionals as part of that association. So keeping that communication open and, you know, formal and informal, so they can, you know, say, hey, we have this interest, we have this question in this area. What can the division do to help us learn more? So that's really over the next year what we'll be focusing on.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Meg. So Nate, over to you from a county perspective. What is your biggest risk, concern, and what are you hoping to do about it in the next year?
I mean, my biggest risk is the pace in which cyber attacks are happening. I think that is probably my biggest concern right now. But one of the biggest focuses we have is really trying to merge our public safety and cybersecurity. They're currently in Virginia. We have a thing called a fusion center, which includes state, local, law enforcement, DoD, private industry, emergency response, and even general public. So we actually are starting to fuse a lot of things together from an information perspective to try to actually have these different industries as we move forwards. And I think back to the information discussion that we just recently had was really trying to figure out how we can respond and be ahead of these things quicker and be able to react to them quicker. I think the time it takes for a issue to propagate across a large area is extremely fast now. So as soon as there's a vulnerability, people are getting attacked instantly. As soon as something is in the public or before it's even released to the public, people are getting attacked. And I think that response time of the ability for people to then understand what they have and what is out there to be able to respond to is really my biggest focus over the next year of how we can do that information sharing, that information collaboration, and have it so it's across multiple verticals, both federal, state, private industry, critical infrastructure, even emergency response. So that way we make sure no matter where that attack comes from or how that cyber attack comes in, we're able to respond to that at any pace or at any angle, and even be able to assist people as much as we possibly can when they're in an event at any given point in time.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Eric, the city that never sleeps. The cyber threats never sleep either. So, what do you have in store for over the next year?
Yeah, I think some of the things we're really focusing on, and I had mentioned some of these already throughout our conversation, but continuing to build sort of that muscle memory on vulnerability management across the different agencies, so that they are able to respond quickly to remediate. I think part of that is also not just their ability to react, but also some of the technical debt and some of the uplifts there as well, as systems become end of life. I also think, as I mentioned previously, the reskilling, upskilling of personnel, right? I think that's definitely a focus for us. I think our intent is to expand what Cyber Academy is, to include additional offerings so that we can continue that mission of, helping folks mature in their journey as cyber professionals. And then lastly, I think, just continuing to increase our visibility across the city, and making sure that we're able to really, as new things are deployed, we really have the right logging and have the right visibility in place, not just the controls, but so that our 24/7 SOC can see things and respond to things quickly. I think fortunately for us, one of the other sort of, I think, levers that we have at our disposal is something we call cyber spend. So we are also helping to consolidate sort of across the city the footprint of security tools, so that there is this array of tools that we have that is uniform. And so through cyber spend, we're able to, as Cyber Command, review all of the security procurements that come in and sort of help make sure they align with that broader citywide strategy. And so we'll continue to do that to help to align that strategy across the entire state.
No, great insights. Yeah, you can't protect what you don't know you have, right? So
exactly,
it all starts with having visibility.
Yep.
So I wanted to thank my esteemed panelists today. Thank you as civil servants and your teams, all the hard work, dedication, sacrifice. I'm sure your constituents and citizens appreciate everything you're doing. And if they don't, then ignorance is bliss. But lucky them. But no, thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to the audience, and look forward to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.